NextIn.
Hey, I'm Wes with NextIn, and I'm on today with Ryan Donovan, Chief Product Officer at GRIN. How are you doing today, Ryan?
I'm doing well, Wes. Thank you so much for having me. Hope you're doing well also.
Yeah, I'm doing really well, man. I would love to just kind of start by you introducing yourself, and then we can just take it from there. We'll talk about what you're doing at GRIN, what you're trying to accomplish, and then how you've grown in your career.
Okay, sounds great. So as you know, I'm the Chief Product and Technology Officer here at GRIN. I'm responsible for our product and engineering teams. GRIN is a creator management platform that really helps brands manage their relationships with creators so that they can drive effective influencer marketing programs. Before that, I was the Chief Technology Officer at Hootsuite, where I was also responsible for product and engineering. Ditto at Sitecore, leading player in the digital experience platform space. Before that, I worked for a smaller company that had a software product division inside of a digital agency that started out as Cactus, became Centium, eventually sold the product division to Sitecore, and then the bulk of my career before that was spent at Microsoft, working first in their consulting services group, and then as the head of product and then general manager of their e-commerce product lines.
That's incredible. Man, when you look back, I mean, you've worked at some really cool places, from startups to things as large as Microsoft. What's like, if you could look at like product or things that you've helped build, what do you look back on like with the most pride?
So I'd say that it's, if I look at products that have had an impact, Microsoft's e-commerce platform ran a lot of the biggest retail and B2B manufacturing commerce platform sites throughout the 2000s through early 2010s. And so that obviously touched a lot of big brands, many of whom I still have, personal relationships with. Obviously Sitecore runs the web presence of some of the biggest companies in the world, like Alaska Airlines or HSBC Bank. And then Hootsuite obviously is a product that's used by hundreds of thousands of people, everything from solopreneurs to Fortune 100 companies and everything in between on a global basis. It touched a lot of people that way, and now, joined the rocket ship known as GRIN, which is going to help brands do the same thing that Hootsuite did, but with respect to their influencer marketing programs.
Nice. So how would brands use GRIN? Like, what's the value proposition for you guys?
Okay, so I'll just give an example. So if you look at, like, say, Cuts Clothing, they're one of our very good customers. They rely on influencers quite a bit to help, generate publicity and leads for their clothes. And GRIN is the platform that actually helps them manage the business relationships, the creative briefs, and the campaigns that they're running with those influencers. So you can think of this as a CRM to manage your creator influencers.
Gotcha. So it's a B2B sell, not a consumer product.
That's correct. All of our clients are direct to consumer brands.
Okay. Yeah, to be honest, I actually had that backwards in my mind. Like, if I'm an influencer and I'm trying to get associated with some of these brands and get my followers and subscribers up, it would be that. So I had it totally inverse. Man, that's cool. What attracted you to GRIN? From Hootsuite?
A couple things. One, great, amazing founders. We really just hit it off. It was just amazing chemistry. And then, this is very, from the time I had at Hootsuite, it was very clear that the influencer space is going to be kind of the next chapter. Because if you think about what's happened, the social media has been ruled by ad spend, but then a little company known as Apple came and changed the app tracking settings, which has made, advertising as a whole, not just on social media, a lot less effective and certainly a lot more costly. And so, owned and earned content is back, in terms of rule of the day, in terms of getting people's attention. And the way you're going to do that as a brand is going to be through influencers. And so, because that's, the best way to get eyes on something now, as opposed to, just taking out an ad on Facebook, which isn't going to have nearly the reach that it used to, since, most people, myself included, have iPhones and have opted in to let Apple restrict the tracking.
Absolutely. Happily.
Exactly.
Yeah, I saw a meme the other day. It's talking about visiting a website in 2022, and it said it had a list of like 11 things. It said disable cookies, disable tracking, deny subscribing to the newsletter, and it goes through all this, and then it's like, and then read my article that I actually came here for. And I was like, yeah, I mean that does capture it. Um, oh, cool, man. When you look at back over your career, you've been in technology leadership for a while. What do you think's been most instrumental in your professional growth?
Yeah, so for me, I think it was, starting my career at Microsoft was very helpful because it taught me what good looked like at some of the most massive scale you can have in the entire universe, because there's very few companies that invest as much into how to produce software effectively as Microsoft. So I learned what good looked like at a really young age. Then I went through kind of the detox of like learning how to fend for myself outside of Microsoft at Cactus, and then those lessons of proven themselves time and again as I've scaled and successfully exited businesses along the way.
Right. Nice. So having a good foundation of seeing it done right at a large tech company kind of just set you up for success. Would you say, is that a fair?
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because I managed to climb the ranks. The tour of duty I did in the field and actually having to work with real customers was incredibly educational. And being it was Microsoft or big brands that you've heard of like Gap or Costco or Washington Mutual Bank or places like that. And then working in their enterprise software division, it also learning how to build enterprise grade products was, you couldn't put a price tag on that education.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Like learning by doing, right?
Exactly. I would recommend anyone, if they have the chance to work for one of the big tech players early in the career, even if it's just for a couple of years, to learn that kind of what does good look like at scale, I think is going to be, an experience that's going to pay dividends for folks.
Yeah, I like that, man. I talk to a lot of younger engineers and product managers who are kind of right before that senior level. They've been in it for like 2 years, and the dream is like, I want to go to like the next big tech unicorn, the next Uber, the next Airbnb, and I think from what you're saying is actually if you could start your career at a Microsoft or a Google or a Meta now, do your time, and then go, your impact would be greater. I mean, would that be a fair?
I think that's exactly it, because you're going to learn what scale is. If you look at a lot of the challenges of the companies I've worked for, they've been challenges in scaling as the business outgrew the talent that was there. And then, mistakes get made, and then somebody like me gets brought in to help, course correct and then unlock the next couple of chapters of growth. That was one of the appeals of going to GRIN, was the fact that it was a bit earlier stage and you get to do it the right way from the beginning. And I thought that was kind of a unique philosophy that the founders had, was let's overhire for our executive team to get people that have gone the distance so that we don't make the same growth oriented mistakes that a lot of companies make along the journey.
Yeah, no, that sounds like, yeah, GRIN sounds like a very intelligently ran company.
It punches far above its weight class for Series B.
Yeah. So when you look at hiring, because we actually spoke about this when we originally talked, you are personally involved in a lot of the hires that you make. Is that right?
Yeah, especially anything that's in a leadership level, I try to be, from a product engineering perspective, try to be involved in, just to make sure that we're getting the right DNA and get, for people that will go the distance, and making sure that we've got, a good cultural fit as well as a good technical fit. Because the reality is that technologies change quite frequently, and and business needs change. And so what you really want to hire for is a good cultural fit and somebody that's a lifelong learner that can adapt to whatever the next wave of technology that happens to come along is.
Yeah. So that spurs another question for me. So when you think about, okay, finding that person that's a good culture fit and a lifelong learner, a lot of folks can fake it, or at least try to fake it in an interview. How do you try to uncover whether or not someone's a lifelong learner? What do you
I
use?
make people, so I'm probably a different interviewer than a number of people, and I make people tell stories and give me examples. I don't ask theoretical questions. I make you actually demonstrate the core competencies that we're looking for. And if you can uncover a track record of people successfully adapting and learning, then you've got it. If they can't articulate those war stories, so to speak, then it's a big red flag.
Right. Yeah, no, that's perfect. So when you look back on all the people you've hired, how do you think that's impacted organizations as a leader when you look at those organizations in hiring? Like, I guess if I could distill that better, what is the impact of a right hire on an organization that's a Series B startup versus the impact of a bad hire and like getting that right and wrong?
Yeah, for a company in Series B, the right hire is going to be somebody that's going to help unlock and sustain growth, and and not be making, not digging the company into proverbial holes along the way, such as a bad technology choice or a feature that isn't meaningful to a customer, et cetera. And that's what a good hire does. I've personally had to deal with circumstances where there haven't been good hires, and have to dig a company out of a hole due to a prior past decision, and it can be either not the right product market fit, or it could be just a bad technology choice that's making everyone's life a living hell.
Yeah. No, I like that. So I would assume if you're looking to hire lifelong learners, you yourself would consider yourself a lifelong learner.
Oh yeah, I'm always looking for a better way to do anything for what it's worth. That's why I love to read, love to connect with and network with other professionals, hear their stories and perspective, pick up new tricks along the way.
What is the most impactful leadership book that you've read?
Well, there's a number of them. I'll give you a couple of my favorites. So I think Escaping the Build Trap is a really good book around that's very pragmatic for how to do product management right. It's written by Melissa Perri, someone who I have incredible respect for. Team Topologies is another great one on the engineering side that really talks about how to structure really high-performing engineering teams. I think those are probably my two most recent favorites to cover kind of the product and the engineering side of the coin.
Nice. Yeah, I actually had Escaping the Build Trap recommended by someone recently, and I'm not in product, I'm in recruiting, but now having it recommended twice, I'm actually kind of curious. What was your key takeaway from that one?
It really comes down to having the right focus and really obsessing about customers, and focusing on outcomes and value as opposed to features for the sake of features. One of the most common themes I've seen in product teams I've run into over the years is that people get obsessed with features as opposed to really focusing on what matters from a customer outcome perspective. So it's like, yeah, you might have a litany of features that check a bunch of check boxes, but the actual user experience is horribly overcomplicated.
Right. Yeah, I heard someone say, and I'm probably going to butcher this quote, but there's like it's an old quote. It said essentially, it's talking about drills, selling drills. You've probably heard this before, but like people don't want a 1/4-inch drill bit; they want a 1/4-inch hole.
Yeah, exactly.
That was like a paradigm shift for me, and even just thinking about my own professional life and like what we're offering to clients when we're trying to help them solve their recruiting and hiring problems. It's like, well, what outcome do they really want versus like, here are all the things we can do, and you get caught up in the minutia of, essentially giving people stats instead of the outcome. How do you avoid that?
I think that one of the frameworks within a product, within the product management craft that I think is really useful is jobs to be done. Then you're completely focusing on the customer outcome, and you can score yourself for how well or how poorly you're actually fulfilling job to be done. And I'll give you, I think, the perfect product example of meeting the checkbox versus delighting the customer. So let's just wind the clock back a decade and change and a half, and think about the smartphone world, circa 2008. BlackBerry and Microsoft were leading the pack, and in terms of smartphone operating systems, they're very full featured. They did everything, including the kitchen sink. Were not particularly user-friendly experiences. And then along comes Apple and Google. They didn't do all the things, especially right out of the gate, but the user experience was so far superior that people flocked to them in droves, and neither BlackBerry nor Microsoft has been in the smartphone space for years. Right. And this all comes down to, solving the problem in the most elegant manner possible.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. I remember the first time I ever personally looked at a smartphone and held a smartphone. I was deployed to Iraq, 2008, and a friend of mine had went home on mid-tour leave, and he came back with one, and we couldn't use it over there, but he was just eager to show us. And he was like, dude, you got to see this. And I think I want to say it was like an HTC. Were they around then? I really don't.
HTC was pretty prevalent, They made a lot of Windows mobile handsets back in the day.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. But I just remember our mind was blown. He was like, I can put music on this. And I can, that's awesome. And then you look at where it is today, and it is crazy. I guess it's Apple and Google dominate that space, correct?
There's really no other prevalent smartphone platform in existence any longer, and it just shows you how, by really focusing on what customers really want and really need, how you can disrupt an entire mature, established category.
Yeah. So personal question here, are you an Apple guy or are you an Android guy?
I am Apple. It was really funny. I went all in with Apple when the week I left Microsoft, and have pretty much never looked back since. In fact, I've got my iPhone 13 Pro Max right here, and then I'm speaking to you from my Mac Pro, which is something you probably don't see a lot of in the wild, but it certainly meets my needs for professional grade workstation.
No, you don't. In fact, I came across a company recently that I was intrigued by called Kanji. Are you familiar with them?
No.
They're a startup, and they exist to be essentially high-level IT support for enterprises that are using Apple products. And very interesting, because look, I've not yet been in an organization where I was given, other than a phone, where I was given Apple products. I worked for a lot of different organizations. I've never been handed a MacBook. But apparently, enterprises are adapting to Mac.
Oh, yeah. Both GRIN and Hootsuite were Mac-only environments. So nice. So you are seeing it in the enterprise, and most startups that I'm seeing are going all in with Apple from the very beginning, and it's easy to see why, because I've had to rely on an Apple store more than once to get something fixed or sorted while traveling, and it's you couldn't ask for a better experience.
Yeah, I fully agree. I had a nasty habit of not putting a case or a protective screen on my phone, and I dropped them repeatedly, and it drove my wife insane. About the fourth time I went to the Apple store, I started using cases. But every time I went, I knew exactly what the price was going to be to have them replace the screen.
Yeah,
they handled it perfectly. The experience was fine. Paying $140 a pop to replace the screen when I could just put a case on it was not fine. But the experience was awesome.
Oh yeah, they did a great job rebuilding my phone last year when I accidentally got it run over by a logging truck.
So wait a second, you had your phone ran over, and instead of just
it still worked. It still worked. The touchscreen was broken, but if you used it in the car, it would still work. And yes, that happened to me during lockdown. I was driving across Canada. Somebody looked at my U.S. license plates, gave me the look of death at a gas station, and I was so flustered that I left my phone on the roof of the car, and I made it just back onto the Trans-Canada Highway, and it fell off the roof and got run over by the logging truck behind me.
And still would call out.
Yeah, it still would. With CarPlay, it still worked just fine.
That's awesome. That is awesome. You should contact Apple because I think that's a commercial in the making.
Oh yeah, I was incredibly impressed because when I realized the phone was gone, I actually used the Find My iPhone feature on my iPad to go back and find exactly where on the Highway 17 it was.
That's incredible. That is incredible. Yeah, if I was in marketing and knew that story, like that's going to go right into a marketing campaign if I'm at Apple. Ran over by.
I was very impressed because all they did was basically replace the screen, and I was back in business.
Yeah, that's impressive, man. That's awesome. Yeah, I'm a fan. And honestly, I think another thing, and I think this touches product too. One of the things that I think Apple does really well is continuing to bring more and more products that have the outcomes that people want, and it keeps you engaged. I mean, honestly, the thought of like converting to Android is just not even a possibility. I'm like too deep into it with iCloud and pictures and.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, they're very good at making customers for life.
I'm really curious to see what they come out with in a couple of weeks here to just announce their next event yesterday.
Yeah, I'm excited too. I'm usually a year behind. My brother-in-law though is usually like he's pre-ordering every time they announce something. So that's awesome, man. So we talked about the build trap, team topology. What was your favorite thing from that?
Well, I think one of the key things that I think many organizations are going to have to think about this inflection point is the notion of having a platform team and then feature teams that are built on top of the platform as opposed to having a monolithic technology stack. Because most companies that have gone down the platform route, a la Uber, have ended up really loving it because they can build much faster and then also pivot very quickly as new things come out. Just look at Uber Eats, for example, how they were able to take their core driving platform and then pivot that to food delivery.
Yeah, pretty quickly.
Yeah, and so that's the advantage of having that versus a monolithic stack. The other thing I like about team topologies is they've got recipes for all the edge cases, like you've got some wonky piece of legacy code, et cetera. They've got good recipes for how to deal with those as part of a broader engineering organizational design.
Nice, very cool. Do you think there's takeaways in that? Because I know it's very engineering focused, but in terms of like just team leadership, do you think that there's takeaways?
Absolutely. It's a great recipe for how to organize for maximum velocity, but do so in a way that meets the needs of your organization. I would think of it as a book of inspiration, ideas, and best practices. It's not trying to be this one size fits all prescriptive authority, which I think is a very rare thing in a business book. Oftentimes, you read a book by, a leader, like I just read Frank Slootman's Amp It Up, and like there's a lot of good ideas in Amp It Up, but it's very much how Frank Slootman likes to operate.
Right.
And not everybody's Frank Slootman.
Right. Yeah,
which is why I like a book like Team Topologies or Escaping the Build Trap, because they're very fit for broad purpose.
Nice. I think I'm asking you this because I'm like, is it worth putting it on my reading list? I love to read, man. It's hard to pull myself away, honestly, from time to time. And you, Ryan, you live in a household where your spouse is also a tech executive. Is that right?
That is correct.
So can you talk about that? Because I thought that was amazing when we first met. It's like, this is a household of two tech executives. Like
it makes for very interesting dinner conversations, and it's nice to have an additional source to brainstorm with. it's also made what I'll call challenging chapters easier when there's a lot of travel or long hours involved, because that empathy is there. Whereas I know, when I was at Microsoft, I knew a lot of couples that split up because the amount of hours required to be successful at Microsoft ended up becoming, a real contentious issue for them. And whereas, I think it's been great for our relationship because, there's just always been that empathy for what the other is going through.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. A genuine sense of like, yeah, I get it because I'm dealing with the same thing.
Yeah, it's like I've had periods where I've had to do 90% travel and, in a different city every week, and it's like, my wife had to go to Europe for 5 years to deal with, an acquisition and then incubate a whole new line of business. And that actually kind of worked out because I was going to Europe once a month. So I just go through and see her on my way to and from.
Yeah, that's cool. That's really cool. So what do you do when you're not working? I know that your work schedule's got to be demanding at the C level, but what do you do when you're not working?
I love a couple things. So I've got a couple of hobbies that don't get as much time as I'd like, but my main relaxation is reading and playing with our dogs. We've got two dachshunds who are being remarkably well behaved for this podcast, and but my other hobbies are architecture and landscape photography and classic cars.
Oh, very cool. What is your favorite classic car? I'll pick up on that.
It's just one I actually have. Took me 18 years to find it. It is a 1966 Bentley T Series, which was kind of the first of the modern Bentleys. It was many cases decades ahead of its time from an engineering perspective, and it's one of the few British cars from the 1960s you can take on a long road trip and actually have confidence you're not going to be being visited by a tow truck.
That's awesome. How did you? So you searched for this car for that long?
I started with I discovered I liked Rolls-Royce and Bentleys early in my journey into classic cars. But what I learned is that I much prefer the style of a Bentley. It's much more understated than a Rolls-Royce, and unfortunately, if you like Bentleys, Bentleys exported to North America represented less than 1% of Rolls-Royce and Bentley's annual production, really until the early 90s when Bentley started to overtake Rolls-Royce. So finding one with a left-hand drive, so the steering wheel's not on the wrong side, was a exercise in extreme patience. I got lucky, buying the car from a fellow club member who was downsizing his collection after his last daughter went off to university and they sold their house. But I've only come across one other car like it in the last 20 years.
That's awesome, man. And so when you need, are you doing any of the mechanicking yourself as it's needed?
No, I don't. I like to drive it, which is why finding one in really good shape and then finishing what I'll call my version of the mechanical restoration to my standards was kind of just like one of the things I did is replace the fuel pumps with modern fuel pumps because that was one of the leading causes of breakdowns on British cars from the 60s. Yeah. And I did a couple other modernizations like that are sanctioned by the factory to just make the car much more reliable.
Yeah, that's awesome. My father-in-law is a mechanical engineer who worked for NASA for a number of years, and in his spare time, he tinkers with anything and everything. And so when him and I met, I didn't know the proper way to hold a wrench, man. I didn't know anything. And since then, we've restored a couple of just not like nothing like that, but just like SUVs. Like I like the old 4Runners, so we've redone a couple old 4Runners back when they were still almost a truck, but they had like a camper on top. So yeah, it's fun. It's really fun.
Very cool. A little envious of your mechanical skills there.
Yeah, I don't want to convey. I think I may be conveying they're stronger than they are. It's more like my father-in-law has mechanical skills, and I get to tag along.
Okay, got it.
It's kind of like that. Yeah, he's not to go on that rabbit trail, but he's a brilliant guy. He's if you've flown any plane you've flown on, whether it's Pratt Whitney engines, GE engines, Rolls Royce engines, he has helped construct, design, or build the wind tunnel that those engines were tested in before they were in flight.
Very cool.
Yeah, so he's a lot smarter than me. Put it that way. Well, Ryan, let me ask you this, and we'll wrap up here. If you could give yourself advice 15 years back, 20 years back, or you could give advice to that kind of engineering manager or maybe senior product manager, if you could give them any piece of career advice to help them grow and progress and get to that senior vice president level, C-suite level, what would you advise? How would you advise them?
I'd say it really is very simple. It's always be learning, always be ready to admit that that you don't have all the answers and that there's a better way to do something, because there always is. And if you can learn and adapt, you'll go very very far. And I think the other thing is getting a diversity of experiences working at different size and scale points, I think is also a very good thing, because it can help you do it. But the trick there from a balance perspective is sticking with it long enough to get some progression and seniority.
Gotcha.
So find something good, give it a good run. And because you'll notice that, like, I haven't hopped around that much in my career. I spent the better part of a decade at Microsoft, minus a small .com vacation, which everybody was doing. It's in late '99. And then, I did that. The Cactus Ascenium journey, it looks like multiple jobs, but it was really working for a company that companies that kept getting acquired. And so that was a journey from 2007 to 2013. I stayed with, Sitecore for 6 years, probably stayed there a bit too long from an opportunity cost perspective, but, I was enjoying what I was doing. So that was all good. Hootsuite, I think I probably maximized just the right amount of time there in terms of maximizing the impact that I could have. And now here at GRIN.
Yeah, that's perfect. If I could tease that out a little bit, I talk again, spend a lot of time talking to like senior level engineers, and there's a big trend. I mean, you're almost weird if you don't leave jobs every year and a half. And I think there's real advantage to sticking something out and getting the grit that comes with that.
I'd say plan for a 4-year tour of duty. One, because then your original stock awards are probably fully vested, but two, you can reap some significant benefits from having done so.
Yeah, that's good. So stay humble. You don't know everything.
Yep.
Be a lifelong learner. Diverse experiences. Get some diverse experiences. Would that be a fair summary of your advice?
Absolutely, with the emphasis on from the learning perspective is always understanding that somebody's going to come up with a better way to do something, and the sooner you can embrace that, the more successful you're going to be. And for the product folks that are in the product side, the best way to have your business cannibalized is by yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tim Cook shed no tears as iPod sales dropped. Why? Because iPhone sales were going up.
That's good. That's good. I think that's a great place to leave it. Ryan, thank you for your time. And if you would, I'd be happy to do this again. I'd love to know more about the Bentley, actually.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Wes. It's been a genuine pleasure.
Next in